Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Jasmine. I am 36 years old. I teach high school English in Charlotte, North Carolina. And 2 years ago, I discovered that the man I married had turned my body and my life into a business. Before that, I thought I had the kind of marriage people prayed for. I thought I had found the one person who would always protect me. I thought I was safe. When Desmond and I first married, we lived in Atlanta. He worked from home as a software engineer, sometimes with international clients. At least that is what he told me. I would come home from school to the smell of garlic and onions in a skillet, or chicken roasting in the oven. Sometimes he had dinner ready. Sometimes we cooked together with music playing softly from the little speaker on the counter. He would ask about my students, laugh at my stories, tease me when I got passionate about a poem or a novel. It felt ordinary in the best possible way. Every night he had a ritual. Around 10:30, he would come into our bedroom with a glass of water and a couple of capsules in his palm. He called them my vitamins. He would set them on the nightstand, kiss my forehead very gently, and say, "Got to keep my baby healthy." I would swallow them, smile up at him, and feel cherished. I did not know that trust can be the most dangerous gift you ever hand someone. We met 3 years earlier at a technology conference in downtown Atlanta. I was there as a chaperone for a group of students in a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics club. He was presenting on cybersecurity. I remember sitting in the back of the room watching him walk through slides about firewalls and encrypted systems, explaining to a room full of adults and teenagers how to protect what mattered. The irony of that burns now, but in that moment he just seemed bright and confident. After his talk, a couple of my students rushed up to ask questions, and he stayed long past his scheduled time to answer them. He caught my eye over their heads and smiled. Later, in the lobby, he found me standing by the coffee station and said, "You must be the teacher. They kept quoting you when they were talking about their projects." We talked for an hour about books and education and the way teenagers surprise you. He asked for my number very politely, saying, "If you ever want a guest speaker for that club, I would be honored." I gave it to him. Dating Desmond was easy. He brought me lunch on days when my schedule was packed with parent conferences. He remembered the names of my students and asked how their essays were going. He met my parents and sat across from my father at the dining table discussing history and politics, listening more than he spoke. When he proposed after a year, under a string of lights in a small restaurant in Midtown, my mother cried and my father hugged him. Our wedding was small and beautiful, held in an old church outside the city with just family and a few close friends. The first year of marriage was full of simple joys. We painted the guest room together. We argued good-naturedly about paint colors for the kitchen. We talked about having children someday and laughed about the chaos that would bring. I was genuinely happy. I would lie in bed at night with his arm around me and think, I did it. I chose well. I am safe. About 6 months before my world shattered, Desmond started talking about health and wellness. He said he had been reading about how teachers burn out faster because of stress. One evening, he came home with a bottle of capsules from what he said was a health food store across town. He placed them on the counter and said, "These are a special blend. Vitamin D, B-complex, magnesium, some natural sleep support. Nothing heavy, just to help you rest." He looked proud of himself, like he had brought home flowers. I did not question it. I was tired all the time from grading, meetings, and after-school programs. It felt sweet that he wanted to care for me that way. The first week I took them, I remember falling asleep quickly and waking up feeling rested. Desmond would smile while we had coffee and say, "See? I told you they would help." I did not know that something else was draining me. The changes were small at first. I started noticing little holes in my memory. Desmond would say, "Remember, you told me we should redo the guest room as a home office for you." And I would stare at him, absolutely blank. Or he would say, "You said we could go visit your cousin in Memphis next month." And I would grasp at the memory and find nothing. When I frowned, he would laugh and tap my forehead lightly. "You are running yourself into the ground, Jasmine. You do not stop. Your brain is allowed to forget a few things." It did not stop with conversations. I would wake up exhausted after 9 or 10 hours of sleep. In front of my classes, there were moments where my mind would freeze. I would be in the middle of explaining something about To Kill a Mockingbird, and suddenly I would not remember what point I was trying to make. My students would sit there, watching me, and I would feel heat rise in my face as the silence stretched. One afternoon, a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "Ms. Jasmine, are you feeling okay?" I forced a smile and said I was just tired, but I knew something was wrong. Then there were the clothes. I would go to bed in an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts, and wake up in a nightgown I barely remembered owning, or a matching pajama set folded in the back of the drawer. I asked Desmond one morning, holding the fabric between my fingers, "Did I get up and change last night?" He grinned and said, "You did. You were half asleep, stumbling all over the place. I tried to help, but you waved me off. You really do not remember." He shook his head and kissed my cheek as if it were amusing. Bruises started to appear. Small ones at first, 4 dark ovals on my upper arm that looked like lazy fingerprints. I saw them one morning while getting dressed for work, and my stomach turned. That night I showed them to Desmond and asked, "Do you know how I got these?" He looked concerned, took my arm gently, and examined them. "You might be anemic," he said, "or bumping into things in your sleep. You have been clumsy lately." He suggested I go to a doctor, and even offered to make the appointment. The doctor ran blood work and found nothing wrong. As I sat on the exam table feeling small in the paper gown, she asked about my job, about stress. Desmond sat in the chair by the wall, his eyes full of worry. When she suggested that anxiety might be contributing to my symptoms and mentioned medication, he sat forward quickly and said, "That sounds reasonable. Teaching is brutal on her. She never slows down." I remember staring at him, feeling surprised. I did not feel anxious, not until whatever this was started. Still, the prescription was written, and he filled it that day. My phone became a stranger. I would see text messages sent from my number that I did not remember typing. Short replies to friends, confirming dinner plans, answering questions from my sister. They sounded like me, but thinner, stripped of the little jokes and emojis I normally used. One Saturday morning I asked Desmond, "Did you ever use my phone last night? There are messages here I do not remember." He glanced up from his laptop and said, "You picked it up around midnight while we were watching that show. You were half asleep, but you said you needed to answer them so people would not worry." He said it so casually that I put the phone down, even though unease curled in my chest. The first person who said it out loud was my best friend, Tanisha. We had been friends since college, roommates once upon a time in a tiny off-campus apartment. One afternoon during my planning period, she called and asked, "Where are you?" I told her I was in my classroom, and she said, "Good. I want to ask you something, and I do not want him listening." My heart skipped. She told me that when we had met for brunch the previous weekend, I had seemed off. She said, "Your eyes looked glassy. You moved like everything was in slow motion. I kept waiting for you to say you were on new medication or recovering from something. Are you taking anything?" I told her about the vitamins and the anxiety medication. There was a long silence on the line. Then Tanisha said softly, "Jasmine, promise me you will pay attention. Something feels wrong." When I protested that Desmond was just trying to help and the doctor had prescribed the pills, she did not argue, but her voice stayed serious. "I love you, and I will not let you brush this off. If you feel even a little bit unsafe, come stay with me." No questions asked. After that call, the unease turned into suspicion. I started watching Desmond more closely. Around that time, I noticed the lock. I came home early on a teacher workday and walked upstairs to his home office to ask if he wanted anything from the kitchen. The door, which was usually closed during his work hours, stood open. The chair was empty. My eyes drifted to the bottom drawer of his desk, where I saw something new, a small silver padlock through the handles. In our entire marriage, I had never seen that drawer locked. When he walked back into the room with a mug of coffee, I forced my voice to sound light. "When did you start locking that drawer?" Desmond barely glanced at it. "New client," he said. "Lots of confidential information. They required extra security measures. You know how that goes." He flashed me a quick smile and asked what I wanted for dinner. On the surface, nothing was wrong, but the image of that lock stayed with me. A few weeks later, the fear became undeniable. I woke up one night heavy with drowsiness, mind foggy, body pinned to the mattress. In the hallway, I heard Desmond talking on the phone in a low voice. I caught fragments. "Tuesday night. Yes, same price. She will be out cold. Do not worry." My heart pounded, but my limbs felt like they were made of stone. I tried to sit up to call his name, but I could not make my body respond. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and he was handing me coffee as if nothing had happened. When I tried to decide if that call had been real, my rational mind tried to explain it away as a dream. The alternative was too terrifying. Still, from that night on, every time he placed the capsules in my hand, a thin streak of ice slid down my spine. He had started watching me swallow them more carefully. If I hesitated, he would joke, "Do not get stubborn on me now," and stand there until I tilted my head back and took them. The night that changed everything began like all the others. He brought the glass of water and the capsules, sat beside me, and watched me put them in my mouth. As they dissolved, I noticed that they tasted slightly different, more bitter, as if whatever was inside them had changed. Within minutes, the familiar wave of sleepiness rolled over me, stronger than before. Fear surged through the fog. I made a silent decision. I would fight it. I clenched my hands until my nails dug into my palms. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I focused on the digital clock glowing on the nightstand, forcing my eyes to stay open, then forcing them to close only halfway so I could pretend to be asleep. About half an hour later, I heard the bedroom door open softly and felt Desmond's presence beside the bed. His breath brushed my cheek as he leaned down, close enough to study my face. I kept my breathing even and slow. After a moment, he straightened and left. I lay there frozen, listening. Some time later, I remember watching the minutes crawl forward. He came back in, moving quietly. Through the narrow slit of my lashes, I saw him pull something from his pocket and hover near me for several seconds, but I could not make out what it was. Then he left the room again. My mind was screaming, but my body remained still underneath the covers. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the creak of the basement door. That sound was distinctive. We almost never used the basement. Footsteps descended the stairs. Then faintly I heard voices. Plural. I crept to the bedroom door, opened it a crack, and stayed there listening. My whole body shook. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. Desmond's voice drifted up. I gave her the usual amount. She will not wake for hours. Another man, deeper voiced, asked, "You are sure she will not come down here?" Desmond answered with a short laugh that made my skin crawl. "She has never woken up before. Relax. I know what I am doing." There were other sounds, something clinking, chairs moving, low male laughter. Fear and nausea hit me at once. I went back to bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the mattress. I lay rigid under the blankets while eventually his footsteps came back up. He checked on me. And then he lay down beside me as if nothing unusual had happened. The next morning he asked how I had slept. I forced myself to smile and say, "Very well," while my hands trembled under the table. That day at school, my classes blurred together. During lunch, I locked my classroom door and sat at my desk staring at the walls. I thought of the bruises, the clothes, the phone call, the voices in the basement. I thought of the way Desmond watched me take the pills. The conclusion formed slowly, and then all at once. My husband was drugging me, and men were coming into my home while I lay unconscious upstairs. It felt impossible, and yet explained everything. Panic alone would not save me. I needed proof. After school I drove, not home, but to a big electronics store near the mall. I walked through the aisles in a daze until I found the section with small cameras. A young employee appeared beside me and asked, "Can I help you find something?" My voice shook as I said, "I need something that records video and uploads to the cloud, something small." He showed me a couple of models, explaining features I could barely absorb. I bought 2 cameras and paid in cash. At home, I waited for Desmond's daily evening run. At 5:30, he grabbed his keys and kissed my cheek. "Do you want me to bring anything back?" he asked. I managed to say, "Maybe some ice cream," as if everything were normal. When the front door closed behind him, I moved quickly. I put 1 camera on the bookshelf in our bedroom, angled toward the bed and nightstand. I hid the second one inside an air vent in the basement after prying off the cover with a screwdriver from his toolbox. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone when I tested the camera feeds. Both video streams showed clearly on the new cloud account I had set up with a separate email address. I checked the time. His runs usually took an hour. I returned the tools, washed my hands, spread graded papers on the coffee table, and pretended to be deep in work when he came back. He wiped sweat from his forehead, kissed my shoulder, and said, "My hardworking wife," with a smile that almost made me forget what he was. That night when he brought me the capsules, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I took them into my mouth, and the moment he turned his head, I pushed them into the pocket of my cheek. When he asked to see that I had swallowed, I lifted my tongue obediently. He smiled and said, "Good girl." then walked out, completely unaware that his routine had finally failed him. I spat the pills into a tissue as soon as he left and flushed them down the toilet. I spent that night pretending to sleep again, listening to him move around the house. The basement door opened at nearly the same time. I lay there, clutching the sheets and thinking of the camera. I repeated this for 3 nights, pretending to take the capsules, pretending to be unconscious, letting the cameras gather evidence. Every morning I smiled stiffly across the breakfast table while he asked about my plans for the day, and every evening I buried my terror under practiced normalcy. On the 4th morning, Desmond said he needed to run errands and might grab lunch with a colleague. He left late in the morning. I watched his car pull away from the window, then almost ran to my laptop. My fingers trembled so hard I mistyped my password twice. When I finally logged in and opened the files, the breath left my body. In the recordings, I saw my own bedroom from a cold, mechanical angle. I watched Desmond bring me the capsules, watched my body go limp and still. Then I saw him come back into the room after I was unconscious. He stood over me, checked my pulse at my neck as if I were a patient, then began moving me. He changed my clothes, arranging my arms and legs as if I were a doll. He unlocked my phone and scrolled through my messages, typing responses, deleting notifications. The stillness of my body on screen made me feel like I was watching a stranger. The basement footage was worse. I watched Desmond lead men into that concrete space. I saw him set up another camera and open his laptop on a table. I watched him show them folders and images I could not clearly see from that angle, but the men's reactions told me enough. Their eyes widening, their mouths curling into ugly smiles, their hands reaching for wallets. One man asked, "She never wakes up?" Desmond shook his head with an easy grin. "Not with what I give her." Later in the recordings, I saw each man hand him cash. I watched them look up the stairs toward the ceiling, toward my sleeping body. Some of them asked questions I did not want to hear. "Any chance of meeting her? You sure she does not know?" Desmond answered in low tones, but I heard enough to know this was not a one-time thing. There were timestamps on the files. The pattern stretched back 7 months. 7 months of my life reduced to footage and transactions. I could not force myself to open the folders on that other camera. The file names alone, strings of dates and numbers, were enough. I slammed the laptop closed and ran to the bathroom, where I vomited until my stomach was empty and my throat burned. Sitting on the tile floor, shaking, I finally admitted to myself that my husband had been trafficking my unconscious body, turning our home into a studio and a marketplace. Shock gave way to rage. I showered, packed a bag with clothes, my teaching materials, and every important document I could think of. Then I reopened my laptop. I uploaded copies of the footage to 3 different cloud services. I saved them to 2 USB drives and slipped one into my bag and hid the other in a box of old books. I emailed the files to myself at multiple addresses. I was not going to let this evidence disappear, not by accident and not by his hand. When I called Tanisha, my voice broke on the first word. "I need you," I said. There was no hesitation. She answered, "Tell me where you are." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop on Piedmont Road. I grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me without leaving a note, and drove away from that house, glancing in the rearview mirror as if Desmond might appear. At the coffee shop, Tanisha took one look at my face and ushered me to a quiet corner table. I told her everything: the capsules, the bruises, the basement voices, the cameras, the footage. Her eyes filled with tears, then went flat with anger. When I finished, she pressed her palm over my hand and said, "We are going to the police. Today. You are not going back there, Jasmine." I whispered, "What if they do not believe me?" She squeezed my hand harder. "You have video. You have dates and times. And you have me. We are not giving him one more day." We drove to her house on the east side of Atlanta because I could not face a police station full of people just yet. From her living room, she called the non-emergency number and said calmly that her friend needed to report a serious crime. Within half an hour, 2 officers arrived, one uniformed and one in plain clothes. The plainclothes officer introduced herself as Detective Carla Bennett and asked if we could sit at the kitchen table. Telling my story to Detective Bennett was different from telling it to Tanisha. She sat with a small recorder near her notebook and let me talk, only interrupting to ask for clarification. When I turned the laptop around and showed her clips from the cameras, her face hardened. She said quietly, "Ms. Jasmine, this is evidence of multiple felonies." She looked at me directly. You are not safe with him. We will need you to come to the station to make a formal statement, and we will request an emergency protective order today." The hours that followed moved strangely fast and slow at the same time. At the station, I repeated details while a different detective typed. They took copies of all the files. A judge signed a temporary protective order that barred Desmond from contacting me or coming near me. I spent the night in Tanisha's guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house. Tanisha sat on the edge of the bed at one point and said, "You did the hardest part. You told. I am proud of you." I cried, and she held my hand until I fell into an uneasy sleep. The next day, police executed a search warrant at the house in Atlanta. Detective Bennett called me that afternoon. She told me they had found the locked drawer in his office filled with hard drives, printed photographs, and meticulously organized records. Customer lists, cryptocurrency transactions, email exchanges. They had seized the bottle of capsules and sent them to a lab. Later, the results confirmed what I already suspected. The capsules contained rohypnol, a powerful drug often used in assaults. Desmond was arrested in the parking lot of his office building. I was not there, but coworkers later told mutual friends that he had tried to argue with the officers, then tried to pull away. They took him away in handcuffs in front of everyone. 2 days later, he managed to call my phone from jail, even though the protective order forbade it. When I heard his voice say my name, a part of me froze. "Jasmine, listen please," he said. His tone was urgent but familiar, the same tone he used when we argued about bills or schedules. "This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain. It is not what you think." Something inside me snapped. I said, "Explain how you drugged me for 7 months. Explain why there were men in our basement at 2 o'clock in the morning. Explain the hard drives, Desmond." He said, "I never let anyone touch you, I swear. It was only pictures and videos of you sleeping. You looked beautiful. I just needed extra money." It was not. I cut him off. "We were fine financially. You did this because you wanted to. You turned me into a product. I hope you spend every day remembering that." Then I hung up and blocked the number. The legal process lasted months. There was a grand jury, where I had to sit in a room and answer questions from a prosecutor named Ms. Harris about intimate details of my life. There were meetings with victim advocates who helped me understand each step. There were days when I wanted to vanish rather than keep revisiting the same nightmare. Through it all, Desmond's attorney tried to create doubt. He suggested I had agreed to some sort of arrangement or that my memory could not be trusted because of the medication. In court, the evidence spoke louder than any implication. The prosecutors presented the videos from my cameras, the lab reports on the capsules, the medical expert who explained exactly how that drug could cause the symptoms I had experienced. They produced cryptocurrency records showing regular payments tied to usernames that matched the email addresses in Desmond's notes. They even convinced 3 of the men who had paid him to testify in exchange for reduced charges. One of them broke down on the stand, saying, "He told us she knew. He said it was something you two had agreed on." I sat there listening, my jaw clenched, thinking you knew. On some level, you all knew. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Desmond guilty on all counts. Administering a drug without consent, sexual exploitation, distribution of intimate images without consent, and human trafficking-related offenses. 3 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, I stood before the judge and the full courtroom to give my victim impact statement. My hands shook, but my voice did not. I told Desmond that he had taken 7 months of my life, my sense of safety, my trust. I told him that he had turned our bed into a crime scene and our home into a marketplace. I ended by saying, "You thought you could break me and walk away, but I am still standing. You are the one in chains." The judge sentenced him to 18 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 12, and ordered that he register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. The divorce moved more quickly than I expected. With his convictions on record and the evidence of financial gain from my exploitation, his attorney had little ground to stand on. I received the house and a large portion of his savings and retirement accounts. I did not want that house, not as a home, but I wanted the control. I sold it within months and donated a significant amount of the money to organizations that support survivors of sexual violence. I used the rest to pay off my student loans and to fund a new start in another city. My mother wanted me to move back to Memphis, closer to family, but I chose Charlotte. It was far enough from Atlanta that I could breathe, yet close enough to drive back if I needed to see my parents. Tanisha took vacation time to help me pack and move. In my new apartment, we assembled furniture late into the night, laughing at the way we kept misreading the instructions. At one point, I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes, and whispered, "This is mine. No one has keys but me." Tanisha hugged me tightly. "This is your fresh start," she said. Healing was not neat. For months, I woke up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was standing over my bed. I installed security cameras that I controlled and checked them compulsively. I double-checked the locks every night. The sight of any pill bottle made my chest tighten. I avoided doctors because I did not trust myself to swallow anything handed to me in a small paper cup. Dr. Williams, the therapist I had started seeing in Atlanta, referred me to Dr. Richardson in Charlotte. Twice a week, I sat in her office and poured out my anger, fear, and guilt. Dr. Richardson did not let me stay in the place where I blamed myself for everything. When I said, "I should have seen the signs," she said, "You saw what any person would see, a partner who appeared supportive and attentive. He chose you because you trusted him, and he took advantage of that. The responsibility lies with him." When I said, "Maybe I was weak," she shook her head. "You installed cameras while you were being drugged. You collected evidence. You went to the police. That is not weakness." About a year after moving to Charlotte, I met Calvin, a guidance counselor at my new school. The first time we spoke was at a staff meeting about graduation requirements. Afterwards, as we walked out, he said, "I have seen the way your students look at you when they pass in the hall. You are clearly doing something right in that classroom. Would you like to get coffee sometime and share secrets?" His smile was warm but not pushy. My instinct was to say no. Instead, I took a breath and said, "Coffee is fine. Somewhere public. During the day." He agreed without hesitation. Our first few meetings were cautious. We talked about students and families and the ways children carry invisible burdens. He never pushed for information about my past relationship. He always asked before touching my arm or giving a hug. On our third date, he walked me to my door and asked, "May I kiss you?" The simple question triggered a wave of panic and tears I did not expect. I stepped back and said, "I need to tell you something before you decide if you still want to be in this." We sat on my couch, and I told him the condensed truth about Desmond. When I finished, I could not look at him. I braced myself for pity or disgust or distance. Instead, Calvin said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me with that. I am sorry that any of it happened to you. None of it was your fault. If you want to end this here, I will respect that, but if you are willing, I would like to keep seeing you. We will go at whatever pace you choose. You never owe me more than you want to give." His words did not erase the past, but they created a small, solid place of safety in the present. We have been together for 8 months now. There are still moments when fear tightens around my ribs for no logical reason. Sometimes I ask to see his phone, not because he has done anything to make me suspicious, but because the old paranoia flares. He hands it over without a joke, without a sigh, without making me feel foolish. When I wake from a nightmare, he asks, "Do you want to talk about it or do you want me to sit here quietly?" And he accepts my answer either way. It has been 2 years since the night I pretended to swallow those capsules and finally opened my eyes to the truth. I still teach high school English, and my classroom in Charlotte has become one of the places where I feel most like myself. When a student asks a question that surprises me, or when a quiet teenager hands me a brilliant essay, I am reminded that there are parts of me Desmond could never touch. My love for stories, my ability to connect, my stubbornness. I am not the same woman I was before all of this, but I am not only what he did to me either. I am the woman who installed cameras while half-drugged, who walked out of a house that had turned into a crime scene, who sat in courtrooms and told the truth again and again. I am the woman who built a new home in a new city, who let herself trust another person slowly, who still wakes up some mornings grateful simply to be in a bed where no one is watching her without her consent. Desmond took 7 months of my life and tried to rewrite my body into something he owned. He failed. I am still here. I am still standing. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.